Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Donald.
And you're in mixed company. Welcome to In Mixed Company, a podcast that discusses mixed race identity and discussing the politics of race respectfully and comfortably in mixed racial company. So on the podcast today is Emboldening Racists and Dog Whistle Politics. How? Why?
Oh, well, there are a lot of reasons, unfortunately.
Yeah. So we'll probably talk about what dog whistle politics are, because I think you hear that term a lot, but a lot of people don't really know what that means.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the other thing too is that there's a lot of examples that come up every day.
And especially in the news around here. Yeah,
it's all almost focused on some aspect of that.
Well, the reason why we're doing this is that news story that happened in our city, right, with the guy in the van in the Walmart parking lot.
Yeah. Do you want to tell that story, or should I?
You can go for it. Tell them what happened.
So basically, this is kind of horrible in every which way, but basically this, I think it was a Muslim family, was in a...
They were brown. I don't know what their race was. They just were not white people.
Okay, so persons of color, a family, were in the Walmart parking lot down the road a little ways, and a white man hit one of them with his truck or van and basically screamed at them all sorts of racial invective, basically was proudly proclaiming himself to be extremely racist and that he wanted to kill their children first and then by implication them later. So
he lost it.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, that's just one example. And you actually see a lot of sort of parallels between that and a lot of other things that we're seeing.
Yeah.
You know,
if I can find a video of the story with the video that was shown in the news, then I'll link it on the blog, which is imcpodcast.blogspot.com.
Yeah.
So that you can have a look.
And I think that might also be part of the reason why, you know, we are hearing more about that, is the fact that technology has sort of closed that gap, because now people have cell phones and they're videotaping all of these things happening.
Yeah, so I guess there's like proof that it's happening. But it leads to the bigger question, right? Like, do people feel more like emboldened to portray like this racist behavior, right? Like, why do we see so many stories of this in the news today? And I mean, I've had my run-ins. And it's been a little more frequently than it had in the past.
Well, I mean, you've had this year even, what, how many?
6.
So that's a lot.
Yeah, I average about 1 a month.
Yeah, that's pretty rough.
So
comparatively.
But I remember in the past, like, it was just so few and far between, like, that when it happened, I was just like, what is happening? But now it just happens so frequently that I don't really think about it.
You're a little more desensitized.
Yeah. Like, I'm mad for a little bit.
Yeah.
But I don't, like, stew in it like I used to, because I'm like, it's going to happen again, so. Yeah,
but I mean, that's not to say that it's appropriate or acceptable. It's just that, you know, you've gotten to a point now where...
I don't think anybody's saying it's appropriate or acceptable.
I hope not. No, I just mean, like, you know, as you become more used to something, sometimes, you know, depending on what side of it you're on, that can be a bad thing.
Well, I think I also... I treat it differently. Like, I'm very careful about where I go. Yeah. I get nervous in certain types of groupings, and I don't like to go out alone at night. And I mean, part of that's just being a woman, but I do get nervous, and I do think twice about doing certain things. Yeah. I mean, which isn't a great way to live. It's more like a self-protection mechanism. But I mean, sometimes sometimes the situation is going to happen, like it's going to occur that I can't not do. Like I do have to go grocery shopping, and I'm addicted to coffee, so I'm going to have to go get those.
Yeah, no one ever wants to see you without your coffee.
No. So we're going to talk about some theories and why we think people feel emboldened to lash out and act violently towards people of different races. We're also going to talk about dog whistle politics, because I think that is one of the theories that I have about why people feel that it's more acceptable, I guess, to say some pretty horrific racist things. I don't know if we'll come to a conclusion today.
Yeah, this is more of a, I mean, like all of it, it's evolving over time.
Yeah.
And I mean, if we are living in a period of backlash right now, we're going to be seeing that for a while, and then eventually there will be an answer. People get sick of this type of stuff, and we move forward. Maybe not as much as we would like, but at least a little bit. So, when you look at it over time, unfortunately what you see is maybe a pattern where this has started, this started going upwards when Obama was in, and now he's out and Trump is in. I mean, that's that's on everyone's sort of mind. Even if we're not even in that country, that's still like part of our awareness.
I think it's kind of facile to blame Trump.
Yeah, I'm not.
I mean, he's one guy. I don't.
I'm talking
and
more.
And I mean,
about...
he has some problematic ideals, I think, but not enough that somebody's going to call me a name at a coffee shop, right? Like, he had said that he didn't like when people were doing that. But on the other hand, he also said that during Charlottesville, there were fine people on both sides. So I'm not really sure how to take his sort of role in this. But, so we do have some data.
Yes.
So I had been doing some research, and I had found a pretty good article from Reuters just last year by John Whitesides, talking about how he thinks, and this is in the American context, of course, that Americans say that race relations are deteriorating from what they were just 2 years ago. And what they had is they did a Reuters Ipsos poll, which are pretty good, and the sample was about 2,800 people, and they thought 36% of those 2,800 people gave race relations the worst rating possible in the poll, saying that it was an imminent threat in America. And this is higher from 29% of the same poll 2 years ago, which is significant. 3 people had also noted that they had seen a greater rise in people's willingness to express racial hostility, and I think that's the point of what we're making here today, is that people in the past, they've always had whatever beliefs they've had, but they're more willing to shout it out now instead of, just, I don't know, yelling it into a pillow or whatever they did before.
Biting it down and burying it deep.
Day drinking. I don't know what they did before. But now they're just willing to sort of take that out on people. And it's funny because they always bring sort of their two-party politics into it. So the Democrats that were surveyed were more negative about perceived threats than Republicans. However, I have a theory as to why that is. Can you guess why?
Is it because most Republicans are white?
Yeah. So I don't know why that point was brought up, but it did make me laugh. I was like, well, no doubt.
Yeah, amazing what being white and rich can do to you.
Yeah. And there have been 2 really good sort of think tanks. There's the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Anti-Defamation League in the United States. And they have actually been collecting statistics about violent and, and like verbally violent and physically violent incidents that are happening with people of color. And so they have a pretty good database of what's going on there. So you should check out their website if you're interested in that.
Well, and they reported, I think they reported a sharp uptick in the incidents as well.
Yeah. And so, and as I had alluded to before, Trump had said after his election that, he didn't like that people were making these bigotry acts in his name. He wanted people to stop it. So he had said that, which is why, and he has said a lot of things. But he had also commented on that. So that's why I think it's kind of easy to blame him. But I don't think that's the whole story.
I think he's more like the great enabler.
Yeah, maybe.
Not that he is commanding people or, like, go out and do this. I don't think that's the case.
I'm not a Trump supporter.
No.
But I think that... and in Canada we call it the quote-unquote Trump effect, which I don't think is fair. Because I think that, if anything, it is more of a backlash of the progress that had been made with politics in the previous, right? Like Obama, who's fairly progressive. He was the president. He also identifies as a black man. He's biracial. And so I think people thought that we were in this sort of post-racial era because a black guy could be president. But I think that, if anything, this is not Trump's fault. I think that this is sort of what happened after that progressive sort of stance, right? Like, here in Canada, we elected a very progressive, very young prime minister. But now here in Ontario, where we live, we're sort of seeing a backlash against that because a really conservative fat white guy just got in as premier, who's the leader of, it's kind of like the state governor, right? And so I see that as a backlash against
And he's
Trudeau.
also a very sort of like shoots from the hip, likes his propaganda. He has a very sort of, I won't say like he's not using the same playbook because the political realities are going to be different, but he does use a lot of that sort of fast movement, antagonizing the media and not treating reporters with respect or even giving them really access to ask questions directly,
and just cutting every sort of social justice influenced like action that's happened. Like, just in the summer, he just came in.
Yeah, he's only been in for a month
and stopped our First Nations curriculum from being written. Wants to go back in time with our sex ed curriculum, so that it doesn't include GLBTQ people, and has cut all the funding for us to renovate our old schools, and
fixed income's gone.
Yeah, the basic fixed income
pilot
project, which allowed people sort of to have enough money to really build their lives again, is over.
Yeah.
And that's just in 1 month. It's been a bit of a
clean energy.
And so I see it more of a sort of like a backlash. I think that's one of my sort of theories, is that it's not just this guy's fault. It's what happens when a culture pushes forward, right? And then there's a group of people who liked the way it was and they want to push it back. But they weren't in the experience of the bad parts of the way it was. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's where I think we're going, right? They're like, well, it was so great when I didn't have to pay this many taxes and this and this and this.
I didn't have to watch what I had to say.
Yeah, and so, but I'm just like, yeah, but you weren't on the other side of that where your culture was completely ignored. Or, you couldn't decide, you had to decide between food and a winter coat. You know what I mean? And so I think that's one of my theories as why people feel more sort of emboldened. It's the backlash sort of idea. And there's a great book on backlash. It's called Backlash. by Susan Faludi, and it's from the 80s. And I've bought it 4 times because I lend it out to people and forget. So if you borrowed my book, can I have it back? No.
Well, the money, because you've already bought it again.
But it's a great text about sort of the ebb and flow of progress, right? So, anyways, what do you think? I know that you wanted to talk about dog whistling, because this is sort of your wheelhouse, so let's go with it.
All right, it's dog whistling. So, and going back to sort of our, our previous episode where we put in focus the definitions that we're using. When we're talking about dog whistling, what we're meaning by that is, especially in politics, is political messaging that employs or uses coded language that appears to mean one thing to the general population, but has an additional, different, or more specific resonance or meaning for a targeted subgroup. So in other words, usually, when you listen to a speech from a far right candidate, or even a far left candidate, they will use examples.
They will use like terms that don't mean what you might think they mean, right? So like if somebody's talking about stopping immigration, it's a little more coded than that.
It's not stopping European immigrants.
Basically. And so some examples that I have heard of is this is a big one for reporters. If you're on a site like a social media site where you make like comments and stuff like that, when referring to certain reporters who are Jewish, putting triple brackets around their names, and that's the Southern Poverty Law Center calls that the echo brackets, and that's to outline that this person is Jewish, right? And so if you were to see 3 brackets, I'd just be like, that guy loves brackets. But that's not really the case, right? And that's sort of an example of a dog whistle, because other people who are sort of in the know will know what that means.
Same thing with things like the word snowflake. Or lib, or there's a word that I don't really like because it's a cognate between liberal and a pejorative for a person with a mental disability. I don't really like to say that, but there are plenty of examples out there. I mean, if you just wanted to do a simple search of words, Google it'll make you want to bleach your eyeballs probably.
Well, and like the whole birther movement, that's another dog whistle, right? Because
exactly. It's a conspiracy theory. Alex Jones.
It's not really a conspiracy. It was like, it means something else. They're like, let's see his birth certificate. Well, what are you really saying? Because he did show a birth certificate eventually, and that wasn't enough, right? Like, so why is that still something that people can call on?
Yeah, no matter what happened there, people still believe that it was all a lie. That no matter what he, and by he we mean Obama, no matter what Obama showed, it was all faked, and he was still a un-American, et cetera kind of thing. Like, they just went down that road, that rabbit hole as far as they could go. So I mean, there's lots of examples of it, and this is something interesting that came up while I was sort of doing, just some background research on the podcast about the idea of a Southern Republican strategy. So I didn't know this, and this is actually something that kind of shocked me, really. But from back in the day when Nixon was running, all the way up to Bush. And all the way up to Bush and Trump, the Republican strategy was basically encompassed a view that the real problem with politics were black people, and the key to winning the presidency in the United States and winning at politics in general was to devise a system that recognized this fact that black people were a problem while not appearing to. And the change that's happened recently is that's gone from sort of a Southern strategy to a nationalized strategy.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, nationalized strategy, like gerrymandering or what?
Well, that's part of it. Gerrymandering, also
voter ID laws.
That too. Restrictive.
Trump wants a voter ID card.
Yeah.
Like you use for buying groceries. He said.
I know. I don't think he's ever bought groceries.
But yeah, he wants a voter ID card, which I think was a thing. If you know if that was a thing, let me know, because I'm not sure.
It's every state has their own rules, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is the way politicians talk was very specific in the South compared to elsewhere in the country.
Home sweet home.
And now they all use the same language. You'll find the Republican Party using the same language against persons of color, immigration, voting abuses, alleged voting abuses, because there's no actual proof anybody's actually done that other than, a few of their own supporters. So that's kind of weird. But it's these sort of intangible threats to the quote unquote American way of life, or the
perceived threats, right?
Yeah.
Because like in the States, blacks are Americans.
Yeah.
Right? Like they were, a majority of them are descended from slaves, like my family is. We're descended from slaves. So if you were to say, hey, where's your family from? I'm like, I don't know, America. We were slaves. And shut down that whole conversation, I guess. But
yeah, everybody was like uncomfortable silence.
So,
oh God.
I mean, yeah, so the dog whistling, my thing is about immigration. We got to limit immigration. We got to build the wall. Well, the wall doesn't go around the whole country, so it's pretty clear what kind of immigration.
Yeah.
They don't want brown people coming from the South, right?
Well, for example, they're not building that wall between Canada and the United States. They're building the wall at Mexico.
Yeah, I know.
And I mean, what's interesting or funny is that Canada is actually approaching, at least in its urban centers now, majority multiracial or non-white, and that's like.
I did read an article about that, probably in the Sun or something stupid.
It was a while ago.
How it'll be more than half minorities, which I found grammatically hilarious.
But also offensive.
But really offensive, because I don't like the term minority, because it's not a numeric minority, obviously, as stated in that title. Yeah. More than half minorities, like.
And also the tone of that article was
alarmist. Hold on, I want to go. So maybe don't use the term minority anymore. Yeah, let's get rid of that. I don't like that one. That's it. Don't use that one.
Deal.
Okay. But yeah, like it was just a panic piece. But I'd seen that before too. Like 10 years ago, I had seen an article like that.
Yeah, and you've also seen those articles recently too.
Yeah.
And it's sort of repeated. We were watching what was it? It was a speech with a guy who's locally running for mayor. Last name
Paul Fromm.
And he
had run for mayor in a lot of places.
Yeah, he sucks.
He's also buds with David Duke.
That should tell you enough about him. But he raises those same points. That alarm. That, oh my God, we're going to lose what makes us us.
No.
And he's talking about white, westernized European culture, whatever.
You won't lose.
Well, right? That's the fallacy.
I'm half Hungarian, and I throw that into every conversation I can. Goodness help you if you're Hungarian, because I'm coming at you with the 5 words I know.
Which are usually funny, or is that Portuguese?
Oh, I'm not Portuguese, but I could play one on TV.
No, I know you, and but you say things.
An angry Portuguese person.
Yeah, but you also say things in Portuguese that make people.
They don't make any sense. They make everybody laugh. It's a lot of fun. That's why I learn languages. But, anyways, back to my 5 words in Hungarian. My mom's Hungarian, and I know 3 foods. Thank you. And a very respectful way of saying hello. So if you're Hungarian out there and you want to know my 5 words, send me a message.
Hit us up. All right. So the question is, again, does dog whistling help embolden people to say racist things?
Yes, because I think it shows them that, hey buddy, hey racist buddy, you're not alone.
Yeah.
I got you. Well, they probably wouldn't say it like that, but, I think that it's a way of sort of creating a community, a secret community for people that have sort of thoughts that are racist in scope.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the idea of social assistance or Medicare, or up here, for example, Indigenous peoples, and any program or sort of social justice effort that assists with those things, and then you're going to hit, there's a wall for the conservative side.
Oh my goodness, did you see that story? This woman's car got spray painted. She didn't know who it was. And she took to social media and was uttering she was writing death threats, how she wanted to go and have a quote unquote purge on the reservation, and I'll kill all the quote unquote Indians. It was bizarre.
I did not see that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel with the Indigenous population in Canada that it's pretty bad. It's they're blamed for
everything,
and it's just to the point of death threats, to the point of somebody sat and typed, and read it again, and then hit enter, these death threats for a crime that she had no idea who did.
Yeah, and chances are it was somebody, I mean, it was probably...
Who cares who it was? You can't just assume.
No, it was probably someone she knew who doesn't like her.
I would have done it.
Yeah, so, I mean, it doesn't, but because most of the time, that type of stuff isn't random.
Yeah.
But it just, it kills me because the same issues always hit, when you're going to find people who want things to say the same. Want things to stay the same.
Yeah.
It's always going to be a conversation about taxes are too high, social assistance is too high, Medicare is a waste, or
I mean, and we talk about social assistance and poverty and stuff like that because a large, a disproportionate amount, I should say, of people who do live in poverty or who do use social assistance are women, or not women, are people of color and women and people with disabilities. And so, I mean, that it's already sort of a vulnerable population.
Yeah.
I also think that there are so for why people feel emboldened to shout racist things is that I think there's more strategies available to people to say things that are racist. So like deflecting.
Yeah.
So you called it, what did you call it? Whataboutism?
Whataboutism. Well,
what is whataboutism?
So let's say you bring attention to a significant issue like, I don't know, police brutality against people of color.
Okay.
And instantaneously, the commentators get on the networks and start saying, so this is happening, but what about this? And then it's like, well, what about, this one specific instance where, this cop was, attacked by a person of color or something like that.
Yeah.
What about the fact that we don't respect our police officers anymore, and blah, blah, blah. And so it changes the focus of the conversation away from the event or the issue that people are trying to bring into focus and deal with, and instead it muddies the waters, it gets people away from that, and it just totally moves. It's kind of like taking over a conversation. So,
for example, like if you have Black Lives Matter and somebody says all lives matter, is that whataboutism or is that dog whistling?
It's both, because at first it starts, well, what about all lives?
Yeah.
Who said it was only...
And then the chant of all lives matter is...
the dog whistle.
Yeah, is a dog whistle to other people who would think that, right? Because when you're saying Black Lives Matter, nobody's saying that the other lives don't matter.
No.
Right? Like, that's not a thing. You're reading into it something that's not there, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's it. So I think that our thing is, like, there are strategies for deflection of issues. So, like, whataboutism. Yeah. There's dog whistling, which helps bring people together through coded language.
Well, and there's also, like, internet communities now, too, where people can share their ideas in forums that are sort of members only.
Yeah, it's not so hard to find
people of
like-mindedness, right? You can just...
It's easier to get a message out.
Yeah.
And it's easier to connect. And the other thing, too, is that people
can encourage you, right? Like, oh, you're totally... You know what you should do? Like...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's that. And also, I mean, people are... Like, it's weird to say this because people are getting smarter. Mm-hmm. The availability, the ready availability of information helps people learn more about how to do things more effectively. And I mean, it's not just anti-racists who are learning.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Others are learning as well. And so everyone is sort of in ingesting information and turning that into something they can use. So people are getting more clever about how they talk. They're getting more subversive in their language. They're not being so overt. I mean, you know. And
there's ways for you to find out about these coded messages, right?
Yeah.
Like, I know I plug them a lot, but the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, is a great resource for looking up things. If you see symbols that you're like, what does that mean? You can look up. They have a whole database of hate symbols, which I suggest that people do because it's always good to be informed of certain things. But we have ways of finding out sort of information, right? And knowing which boards to steer clear of and strategies on how to deal with, trolls online and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, and then, on the other side of that, you also have the trolls sharing notes on things like 4chan and stuff like that. Like, hey guys, let's start this. And then it becomes a viral sensation in the wrong way.
Yeah.
But that's sort of the negative aspect of things.
Yeah.
I think there's also a positive aspect too, and I think that's really, I mean, not of the dog whistling stuff, but rather of people's reaction to it.
Yeah. I think that when something happens, people are like, what? That's awful, right? And so the reaction to these stories and people documenting them, right, so that they could be spread, like through the news. I think that's really important.
Yeah, so keep filming stuff.
And then the news is really serious about reporting them, right? Like they're not like, hey, look at this. That was all right. Like, they don't report it in that style. They're like...
Well, and how long do you think it was ago when people, would report these things to the media, but the media didn't really take any notice or didn't put them on prime time,
Yeah.
Unless they were really, really bad.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now it's every day.
And things that become viral, like the permit patties and barbecue Becky and what was the other guy? That skeezy lawyer guy?
I don't know.
Do you remember skeezy lawyer in New York? Who was like,
yes.
Speak English.
Yeah, that was awful.
And they're not even talking to you. What do you care?
So he got let go from his law firm.
Oh. Well, we'll talk about that another time. But like, I think that we're also policing that too, right? Now, this is another podcast. Do we deserve to destroy people's lives for them making those mistakes? I don't know. But there should be consequences. But
well, I think as long as the legal consequences make sense, you don't need the social consequences. Yeah. The question is are the legal consequences effective?
Yeah, and I think we'll have to explore that another time.
Another time.
So, thanks for the discussion today, Don.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Yeah, I don't think we solved anything, but I think we brought a couple of theories to the forefront.
If you and me could somehow solve racism, good Lord, we should bottle that.
Oh, well, maybe I'd be all about the Benjamins. I was so happy there for a second. And just because the podcast is over doesn't mean that the conversation has to stop. We'd love to hear your comments on today's discussion, your reflections, if you have any questions. You can visit us at our blog at imcpodcast.blogspot.com, or you can tweet to us at imcpodcast. If you're a Facebook user, we have a page there too at facebook.com/imcpodcast. Our email address is inmixedcopodcast@gmail.com if you want to get in touch with us that way. Our theme music is the song Righteous Fight by Angara. Thanks for listening. See you next Sunday.